Hello there, my name's Phil Williams and I would like to welcome you to Audio Angling, the podcast site of fishingfilmsandfacts.co.uk. This contribution comes from ex-England international boat angler Steve Quinn, who I've fished with on a number of occasions over the years. My earliest recollection probably goes back to the 1980s and the leisure angling Rosslare boat festivals organised by Dave Houghton. We were both fishing from trail boats back then, and while I still am, the competitive streak in you pushed your career in a totally different direction as you pursued and eventually answered the international call, representing England on numerous occasions, which is the reason why we're having this chat today. Now I know from talking to a number of other ex-internationals, and not all boat anglers, nor even sea anglers, that the public face of what we get to see in the press as the teams stand together showing off their medals is the tip of a very large iceberg, with a great deal of work being required to get into the frame of that photograph at all. And as we go along, the investment compared to the payout, and whether or not you thought it was all worth it in your eyes, is something I would very much like to pursue. But for now, how and why you got yourself into the squad is crucial in setting the scene regarding the other strands to your story. So what I'd like to do first off is have you talk about your earliest angling recollections before the international call was even considered. How did you finally settle on sea fishing, and more specifically fishing from boats?
Well, basically, Phil, I started off as a course angler, roughly about, that was the age of 7, through the age of 12. There used to be local lads that I used to see coming home every Saturday, Sunday, with big bags of mackerel and the odd skate. And this was something I thought, I'd like a little bit of that. So I started, firstly, a bit of beach fishing, and then I started on the charter boats. I started to really enjoy it, fish with the adults, and I started fishing the odd match as a junior. I then progressed a little bit more as I basically got a bit better. And I started to fish the senior matches, started doing really, really well at them. Due to the availability of charter boats, I decided to get a small boat with a friend so we could go out when the weather was good and we had the time. So that was it really. That was the start of my small boat fishing, which progressed then to me joining the Wirral Boat Angling Club, which was really the start of my angling career. I really got the bite then on the match fishing side, even though it was only at club level, and I just really wanted to progress.
What sort of competitive structure then do they have at the Wirral Small Boat Club?
Wirral Club, we used to have a summer and winter league. We had a lot of trailaways, and obviously we held the cod match in the river during the winter. The summer league, we all used to launch at New Brighton and out towards the bar area, mostly species fishing, which I really enjoy. And obviously the winter, it was more based in the river, fishing for white and codlin and maybe the odd dogfish, dabs and anything else to come along.
And now, with hindsight, having fished competition from both charter and trail boats, which do you think taught you the most and best prepared you for your try for the England team?
Both really. Obviously on the charter boats you've got more anglers, so if if one man's catching, I used to tend to put my rod down and go and have a little look and see what he was doing different to myself. The small boat angling, obviously I fished with some really good anglers like Sir Mick Duff, and we used to bounce ideas off each other. We were both very hungry and keen at the time to improve and go further afield. So as we progressed, we started trailing the boats away and fishing more matches. I think you do learn a lot more in a small boat angling, especially on the species side, looking for your terrain in different areas, looking for tide, where the species should be. So I think the small boat angling taught me a lot.
In the case of small boats, you've nobody but yourself to rely on to find the fish, which is bound to make you think a lot more about what you're doing.
That's right, Phil. Also, obviously, you're reading the charts, wondering why other little boats are nipped into little bays and going into the shallows for your mini species. It just gives you a bit more. Obviously, it's a lot easier to up anchor and move as well with a small boat, so you can cover a lot more ground, a lot quicker. I think the small boat angling really pushed me forward.
So was everything you did competition orientated, or was there also some pleasure fishing in there as well?
Yeah, there was a lot of pleasure fishing, Phil, but with being keen at the time, we always looked towards the match fishing side. We had some fantastic days on the pleasure angling, on the bass, on the tope fishing, and obviously drifting for place. Yeah, we had some fantastic days.
I suppose when you're into match fishing, it pays to have that single-minded approach. But have you always been so competitive?
Yeah, Phil, from a very early age, I think from my first fish was a tench at the age of 6 in Birkenhead Park, and I always wanted bigger fish, more fish, and I was always keen. I was never scared to ask questions and basically stop and watch what other people were doing.
And as we all know, that helped take you through to the England boat fishing squad, which is something a lot of other people would like to have a crack at, I'm sure. What then must people do to bring themselves into international contention, and having got to that stage, how is the final squad ultimately chosen?
Well, Phil, you've got to put yourself about in all the matches you can. Obviously, it's very awkward being from the north, because a lot of matches are down south, and they do tend to stick to southern-based anglers, because obviously they can fish the matches and the areas a lot more than northern anglers can. What you've basically got to do is get your results and just plug away, fish as many opens as you can, even the club level, keep a note of all your matches, and obviously then put your application form in.
So it's not done on a qualification by point system then?
Not really, Phil. It's they normally watch you for a couple of years. You put your application form in, you'll be very, very lucky to be picked first time. Obviously anyone can have a really good year. I think what they tend to do is watch your results for 2 or 3 years and then give you a shot of an open weekend then, where you'll pick the top 16 anglers in the country, and basically you tend to have a bit of a fish off over the weekend. Normally it's Weymouth or Plymouth, and then obviously they'll pick a squad of 10 out of the 16, and of that 6 will then be picked for the team.
And does that include a reserve?
And it'll be 5 in a reserve, yeah.
And are you then a member of the squad for that year? Or are the squads perhaps selected on a competition by competition basis?
No, that's the same every year, Phil. Once you've been picked for that year, obviously you've got to plug away, carry on fishing your matches, and again you've got to reapply the following year.
Now, when I spoke on this subject to ex-Welsh team member Gethin Owen, he was of the opinion that anyone with international ambitions should seize the opportunity to go as a reserve. Also put themselves forward as a steward to see how the setup works, what the competition pressure is going to be like, and of course to pick up some useful tips from the world's top anglers. Would you also subscribe to that view?
Yeah, I'd definitely recommend. I've done it many a time myself as reserve, and you'd be surprised really what you do pick up. Obviously while you're on the boat you're watching 8, 10 obviously quality anglers, because they wouldn't be there if they were anybody, but you can pick up so much just by standing behind an angler who's doing well on the day.
When we were chatting earlier, you mentioned Slovenia as being a good example of just that.
Yeah, in Slovenia I was placed at the back of a boat with a local Slovenian, and he had 11 fish before I'd even seen a bite. We were fishing in 160 foot of water for small, very, very small bream and Jurels, which are a rainbow wrasse. With this is 11 fish, I hadn't even seen a bite, and I thought that I've got to be doing something wrong. So I put my rod down and basically just stood to one side and watched. And I didn't even see his quiver tip move, and he was into another fish. So I just thought, something's not right. So I carried on watching, then sussed out that he actually wasn't watching the tip. He was watching the bow in a line where it entered the water. So before they registered on his quiver tip, he'd already struck and was into a fish. I obviously adapted the same method, and he only ended up 8 fish behind him at the end of the day. And between 1 and 2, we done very well.
On his own patch, you would expect him to do well. But had you gone through similar learning processes with established members of the England team, and for that matter, other home international squads?
Yeah, that's correct. The southern lads, given the due, are very, very good at pollock fishing for some reason, even drawing a redgill, fishing a redgill. And I always wondered why they were so competitive and why they were so good at the method. And basically a lot of it is the turn of speed that you bring the gill in at. You know, if the tide's running a bit stronger or a bit slacker, he'll speed up. And it was watching the likes of Ray Barron and Bobby King, who were very good pollock anglers, that I picked up the method myself.
When fishing for a squad place, you'd expect southern anglers to do well on their own patch. But is that necessarily a good barometer? Particularly if an international is being held outside the UK, but the fishing may be equally alien to all of you.
It's a good question, Phil, but it seems to have been, over the years, anglers from the north, it's been very hard to have been picked. There seems to be, how can I put it, a clique of anglers down south that seems to be virtually in the top 10 to be picked all the time. I don't think the northern anglers are really given a fair crack of the whip, because when they have been picked, they've done it exceedingly well, really.
So is getting good qualifying results only part of the story? It sounds like your face also has to fit. In other words, jobs for the boys.
It's a bit of both, I think, Phil. Obviously, the anglers that are getting picked are good anglers, but sometimes there is better anglers out there that have applied and haven't been picked. So sometimes I think, sometimes it may be jobs for the boys.
Daft question, but how does that make you feel?
It's a bit annoying, Phil, when just the cost element alone, when you travel down on a Friday to fish a qualifier on a Saturday and Sunday, stayed over the Monday, come back, done really well, and then you don't get a shout. Yeah, it is a bit annoying, but that seems to be the way it's been over a few years.
And always, the cost involved is entirely down to you.
Yeah, the finances, Phil. For a Weymouth match where we travelled down and fish a qualifier, we sat down and worked it out the other year. And just one weekend would probably cost us, between the boats, the accommodation, your travel, roughly £600 to £700, and that's before your 2 days lost work.
Having spoken to a number of international anglers from the various home teams, it's obvious that qualification can differ markedly from nation to nation, and probably even more so when you factor in Europe and the rest of the world. Welsh qualifiers, for example, were, and possibly still are, fished 2 hours anchored over the sand, 2 hours anchored over the rough, then 2 hours on the drift to get the most consistent measure of versatility. How is the final England assessment made?
Basically the same thing. The match will be based over 4 to 6 hours. We move every hour and a half, so each angler is not fishing the back of the boat or up towards the wheelhouse. They tend to do the same. They tend to have 2 hours at anchor, 2 hours on the drift, an hour on the rough ground, and an hour on the sand. So yeah, it is roughly the same as the Welsh. Obviously, your boat captain and you have a steward on the boat that takes notes of, after the whistle goes, how quick you're down, how ready you are, your bait's prepared, your spare rig's ready, everything at hand. Basically, you watch from the time you go out.
And is it still jobs for the boys, even at the final selection stage on the boat, or does ability and performance on the day then start to kick in?
It's an awkward question. Over the years, I've seen really good anglers, even on the qualifier matches, really good anglers have a bit of a poor day, and this has gone against them on the application, where for the full year they've really pulled out the stops. So myself, I think it's a bit unfair to judge one angler on one day. We can all have a bad day, but I still think it is quite southern orientated.
So you make it into the final squad and you've arrived at the chosen international venue for the match itself. Do the cost implications still lie with you, or is there then some degree of team support?
We had a small bit of help from the Sport Council, which was about 25% of the costs. This was the cost of your travelling, basically, some cost of your accommodation. But for the likes of going over to Slovenia, Croatia, Marseille, Germany, we'd probably go over 5 days before to practice. And then obviously you've got the accommodation. That's 10 to 14 days would probably cost me in the region of £2,000, even with the help from the Sports Council.
What about sponsorship in terms of tackle and bait to ensure everyone is best equipped for the challenge at hand?
Obviously, a lot of that depends on the manager. We were very fortunate to have some good managers throughout, the likes of Colin Bond. A lot of that was down to the manager before you got to the venue. If he knew exactly what rigs, what rods, reels, whether it was going to be a braid venue or a nylon venue. One thing with that, when we went to Croatia, we went on the gun really. The lads were fishing with 15-foot quiver tip rods, which we didn't take over. These were something we really needed. And obviously, you can buy them there, but you're looking at £300. It's a big lump to pay out before you even start. Paul Cartwright was probably the best manager we could have got. He'd done a lot of homework. He used to travel a lot to Italy through his business, and he used to buy a lot of tackle over there to help us out. He'd do a lot of homework, and yeah, he was really good.
So what happens then in terms of bait? Is that down to you, the team, or is the same supplied to everyone on the day?
Bait supplied on the day, right down to the last quarter ounce, make sure everyone's got exactly the same bait, same quality of bait. And what happens is, your bait is, if there's 12 countries, you've got 12 bags of bait, and you go and you throw your own bag. So, there can't be any rumours of, they're better bait than others. It's down to yourself. The bait was normally pretty good. Everyone's bait was the same. That side of it, the bait quality was really, really good.
A limited amount of bait will also force you to use it more carefully, because presumably, when it's gone, that's it.
That's right, but especially on baits in the Mediterranean, when you're fishing small mussel baits, what I tend to do was when I'd fish the bait, I'd unhook a fish, I'd take the bait off and put it in a little tray, maybe with a little bit of oil. You have to be very careful because some of you didn't like using preservatives or additives or whatever. And that has pulled me out of the mire quite a few times. Obviously, you've just got to, sometimes them fish, you'll have 10, 12 baits ripped off before you've even known it, so you've got to be very, very careful with your bait. That's always helped me out to just keep me bait back, even if it's, it is a bit worse for wear. And at least you've got something going down on a hook at the end of the day.
And is the same bait supply also there for the warm-up days to ensure you practice under match conditions?
Yeah, that's right, Phil. You pay for exactly the same bait that you'd use on the match days you get on your practice days.
What, if anything, happens in terms of team orders? Is there a pre-match master plan, or are you pretty much left to get on with the fishing as you find it on the day?
Well, basically, after the initial practice days, after 2 or 3 days, you should have come to some method. Obviously, what we did find in many a venue was the practice days, you'd go out fish 30, 40 foot of water, and then on the match days, they'd move you to another zone where you'd be in 160 foot of water. So sometimes, obviously, the method that you'd use close inshore didn't work offshore. The manager probably knew that you could cope with that change and do your own thing. But there was a team strategy, and obviously, if we went to the same venue we've been practice on, we'd stick at that. If it didn't work, then it was down to the individual angler to change.
Another twist to that is the fact that, in effect, there are 2 competitions going on at the same time, the team and the individual. At what point, then, can you decide to fish for yourself, or must you always be fishing for the team with individual honours coming along as an incidental bonus?
I've always been a team angler. Obviously, you just do your best on the day, and if it comes out that you're going to be one of the top anglers. But I fish the same whether I was fishing for myself or for the team. Over the years, I have seen, even with my own team members, they've found a tactic, and it hasn't been passed through the team, and, it's paid off dividends for them. So it all depends on the individual angler. You have team anglers and you have people sometimes a little bit selfish and go for it for themselves. I've seen it on many occasions.
But if you have a team strategy and someone, for whatever reason, decides to stray from it and it doesn't pay off, are there then repercussions after the event?
Well, basically, yeah, we'll sit down after the competition. We'll sit down with the manager, and obviously he'll have a bit of a talk with us. Why did you change? Why didn't you stick to the method? But that was about it, Phil. There was never any, anyone drop, not sticking to the rules, really.
And what do you as an individual come away with from fishing both under pressure and as part of a team in terms of being a better angler as a result?
Well, my personal game was knowledge. You're fishing with the best of the best, and I've learned so much from the Spanish. The Italians are a league of their own, and just to fish amongst them, you pick up so much knowledge, information, just down to the speed fishing and basically what they're doing, fishing different coloured leads and when to switch and braid tomorrow. You just pick up so much knowledge.
Before we move more into tackle choices and tactics, now is probably an appropriate time for you to give us a quick run through of your achievements with the squad.
I think my biggest letdown, not so much for myself, was from the actual England team itself, as my points and scores and career over the years in Ireland have been really good. I've had some very, very good results. The World Championships in Ireland 4 or 5 years ago, I was picked as reserve, which I was a little bit down on because I had only just won a big competition over there the fortnight before. But anyway, we went out. I went out as a reserve. We'd sussed out. I was very good at Gurnard fishing, basically, because Liverpool Bay it was very similar fishing. So we came up with a tactic, a method. I tied the rigs for all the team. We had quite a big drive over morning from where we were staying to where we were fishing. So it was a drive for me to drop the team off a morning and back. I was promised that the reserve position was only temporary and it would go on the angler's ability during the day. If anyone wasn't performing, basically the reserve would move in. But it didn't happen, Phil. Some of the lads didn't stick to the method, had disastrous results the first 2 days, and the Italians actually walked the competition, and I didn't even get a shout. And I think that was a sour note on the England team for me. But over the years, I've been European champion twice. I've been in the winning team. I've been in 5 home international teams. I've had 4 gold medals in the internationals, 2 silvers, 3 bronzes. Been European Cod champion twice. So I've had some really good results over the years. I think the initial one was my first competition I got picked for was in Swansea. It was a home international. I was the first Northern angler to be picked for a long time. I think the first was Alan Sharp from Liverpool. So I really wanted to go out and prove my point. We were out with quality anglers like Steve Suter, Gordon Lyle. It was more dogfish ground really. And I won the boat with 135 fish. I had a stormer of a day. 70 dogfish, 62 white and 3 conger. I think the next to me was Stephen Suter, who scored 42%. I've got a lot of respect for Steve, so that was one of my highs of my international career, especially it being my first international as well.
But when you're seen in the press holding up the medals, though they are the pinnacle, as I said earlier, these are just the tip of the iceberg, because out of sight is a lot of preparation, a lot of practice, and by the sound of things, a lot of cost as well, which people do tend to overlook. How difficult is it then to maintain that level of input?
I think, Phil, originally getting into the team was hard enough, and I think that is when it really all started, because obviously you want to carry on being picked for the team. I was permanently tying rigs on the phone, bringing people for my next competition, making sure my bait was perfect, having aerating tanks in the garage, digging my own ragworm. There's so much work in the background, and obviously you've got to have the tackle for the job, and that tackle doesn't come cheap. So the homework behind it is a big part of your results at the end. I would say 70%. We can all go out and catch fish when there's fish under us, but if you do your homework right, it makes it so much easier for you.
Give us some idea of timescales here. How long was it, say, from taking up sea fishing to thinking about trying for the England team?
Basically, when I was around about 18 and 19, I stood out in a few matches and I just really wanted to go forward. I applied when I was 29 for the England team. I was asked to apply, and the first 2 years I didn't get picked. I was 32 and I eventually got picked for the team. So it was a good 10 years really.
That was going to be my next question actually. Was you approached to apply for the team?
I was fishing a competition in Scotland, and I was asked to do a bit of a talk of a night time on basically what makes anglers a better angler than somebody else. And I just give a bit of a talk, and then I was approached by Colin Bond, and Colin said, would you be interested in fishing for England? Well, of course, yeah, I'd love to. He said, well, if I was you, he said, I'd put an application form in. He said, I must be fair to say you mightn't get picked for the first year, but just plug away. Just keep your results going in, and we'll see what happens. And obviously, 2 years later, there it was.
So what does make one angler better than another?
I think one, Phil, you've got to want it, really. You've got to want to be better. I was always one that if an angler was catching and I wasn't, I'd always go and find out basically what I was doing wrong. I think it's that hunger. You've got to have the hunger for it. And also, you've got to have the ability. I think if you do your homework and watch good anglers who are fishing well at the time, I think that goes in your favour a lot.
And when it finally does come along, how does it feel that first time out?
Oh, it's amazing. Absolutely amazing. I'll never forget, it was 10 o'clock on a Friday morning. The letter come through the door, and it was an hour before I opened the letter, because obviously it had been turned back twice, and I thought, oh please, not this time. I opened the letter, and there it was, yeah. It was absolutely amazing feeling. You feel that all the work you put in over the years, it's paid off for you.
Now, getting to that point is one thing. Staying there, presumably, is another matter. How hard can it be maintaining that level of form and commitment to stay there year on year?
Well, that's where the problem comes. As I said earlier, it's getting picked is one thing, but then trying to maintain that is unbelievable. Because then you've got no option. You've got to go out. You've got to fish the opens. You've got to go down south and compete against them lads. And not just compete, you've got to beat them or be up in the top 5, 6 anglers all the time. That puts a lot of mental pressure on you, and obviously financial pressure. That's a bit of a killer really, but if you want it, I'm afraid that's what you've got to do, and that's what makes it hard really. The financial side is very, very hard.
Speaking to other internationals from the shore, boat and even course fishing squads, there eventually comes a point, sometimes accelerated by politics and bad feeling, where it all starts to wear a bit thin. Though always an honour, it isn't so much of a pleasure anymore. There are also going to be personal pressures too. Then disillusionment and resentment sets in. Does any of this ring true with you?
Quite a lot, Phil, yeah. Obviously, I was in the England team for 15 years, and the first 4 or 5 years you're really on a high. Sometimes then it starts getting a bit mundane, things start going stale. I'm not saying you lose interest, but it's not the same as it was. It's a funny question really, because I think for the last 3 years of the internationals I didn't really enjoy it, but obviously nobody wants to bow out really, so you plug away. But the early years were far, far better. And I do find that when you get to that level as well, there's quite a lot of backstabbing and animosity amongst anglers. Not so much the international anglers, but other anglers get a bit jealous maybe, you know.
This isn't aimed at you specifically, but in some cases the pressure, time input and cost can also affect people's personal lives as well.
Well, it definitely affected my personal life. For the first 7 years, I probably didn't see my son grow up at all. I got divorced as well, which certainly didn't help, because basically I was never at home. If I wasn't at work, I was fishing. If I wasn't fishing, I was digging bait. If I wasn't digging bait, I'd be down watching somebody fishing a beach match or in the local tackle shop talking away for hours. So yeah, it certainly cost me a lot in the early stages. Obviously I didn't see my son grow up at all really, so it does put a lot of pressure on your family life, definitely.
So with hindsight, would you still go down the same route again, knowing what you know today?
Yeah, I probably would, Phil, yeah, to be truthful with you, yeah. I'd probably do things a little bit differently in a way, as I certainly wouldn't put myself in the financial pressure that I did. And to be truthful, things were great, but as you get a bit older, I think you tend to think, well, maybe if I'd have done this and I'd have done that. I certainly wouldn't put myself under the financial pressure by going and fishing every match that I could just to score points really and keep my name in the frame.
Am I right in thinking then that all those who get onto this particular treadmill will come out of it better all-round anglers than when they went in?
I wouldn't say they'd be better anglers. I think they'll pick up a lot more knowledge. It's whether they want to put that knowledge to trial really. I know a lot of anglers, good anglers, that have reached international level and packed the sport in completely. Basically due to the pressure it puts you under.
So what, specifically, do you think your England squad years taught you?
It certainly taught me to do my homework on venues. I think that's a major part. Obviously I've enjoyed it. You know, you can't do any more than fish for your country. You can't do any better than fish for your country. It's taught me a lot, and I've met a lot of lovely people all over the world. But I think now I'm actually out of the frame, I can sit back and relax now. It does take its toll.
And from what you tell me, you're going to get to handle and use rods and rigs which as a pleasure angler you probably never get to see. Has there been anything in that respect which you brought over into your pleasure fishing which you think has made a profound difference?
Well, basically it's taught me, one, to be more prepared. I think sea angling's changed dramatically, especially with internationals fishing abroad. I tend to find that a lot of English anglers fish very heavy. They're very overgunned with the tackle, hook sizes. Obviously fishing braids change things dramatically. Basically be more prepared and fish for bites instead of fish. Basically scale down, definitely fish smaller, and obviously it helps you with your speed fishing.
I'd like us to move on now more to tackle and tactics. Let's start with rod choice. Sticking with home waters, how long or how light can you go, and what can these rods bring which more traditional blanks miss out on?
The problem is, Phil, and I've seen a lot myself, is once you fish the 15 foot, 14, 13 foot quiver tip rods abroad, a lot of English anglers try and fish the same tactics and fish the same tackle in this country, and it doesn't help you. I think it puts you behind a bit, because I've seen lads trying to swing dog fishing on 15 foot rods and snapping the tips, and I think you've got to adapt your tackle to whatever water and whatever type of fish you're going to be catching really. There is a time and a place for the 15 foot quiver tip rods if you want to get away from the boat. Obviously if you're speed fishing for smaller fish, I think these come into their own. But the general fishing, especially in the north where you're not looking for your bream as you are down south, I think your standard English tackle is quite ample.
Strength of tide also has to be a factor in how far a rod can be scaled back.
Well, of course, Phil, yeah, because obviously the quiver tip rods, you're only really up to 6 ounces, and there's not a lot of venues we fish now that will take 6 ounces, like the River Mersey. Obviously, downside, you look at a pound plus a lead, so the 15 foot rods certainly out there. I say that there's a rod for every venue, and you've got to really think about that when you're going to fish a match or whether you're going to pleasure fish.
What about choice of reels? The fundamental question, I suppose, has to be fixed spool or multiplier.
Well, obviously, Phil, I fish both. With the quiver tip rods, yes, I do fish a fixed spool, but that is about all. I know a lot of odds now are fishing for cod in the river with fixed spools, but I wouldn't myself personally use one. I'd stick to the multiplier. But yeah, it's like everything else. There's a time and a place. Fixed spools, I think they're good for fishing for smaller species when you're speed fishing. But I tend to stick to a multiplier when I'm fishing for bigger and heavier fish.
And what is it that gets loaded onto the spool? Mono or braid?
It's very, very rare I use monofilament now. I don't think I've used mono now for probably 7 or 8 years. I tend to fish braid all the time, and I never ever go over £30. The quality of the braid now, I don't think there's any need to step up. I even go down as light as £8 braid. But I think braid's the way forward myself. Well, a lot of people are still stuck on mono. I know Jim Presley wouldn't think of putting braid on. I suppose it's what you're happy with as well, But I think braid is the bee's knees, I think, though.
I use mono by choice, but I wouldn't describe myself as stuck. I do it based on many bad braid experiences, particularly when uptiding, when suddenly it cracks off during casting, or when a good fish pokes its head through the surface. In both cases due to unseen wear from grass or weed chafing it at the swivel knot. I do still use braid on occasion where it is an absolute must, but if I can manage without it, I will.
I suppose you're right, Phil, but I think sometimes it's, especially at match level, when you're looking for bite detection, obviously there's nothing better than braid, but it's a personal choice. As you say, you've gone back on mono. It does have its advantages. I have found sometimes, especially on when you're drift fishing, you can get a much slower drift if you fish mono because of the give in the mono. That's the only time really, if I'm fishing for place on the drift, I would definitely switch back to mono then.
So what about hooks? And I'm not thinking here of sizes, as bait and fish size will determine that. I'm thinking more of specific patterns, barbs and wire gauges. What are your thoughts and preferences in that regard?
I always fish a quality hook. I love Camazon. I've fished Camazon hooks for years. I do squeeze a barb down on a dogfish in the matches because the unhooking makes it so much quicker. It's like everything else, it's your own personal choice. I use Camazons and Uptide Vikings, another quality hook. Again, I like them. Good strength hook. I don't like some of the hooks now, I think are a bit overgunned, a bit heavy. I always like to fish a medium wire. And I seem to be happy with them couple of maker hook.
What do you think about attractors, either on the trace or butted up to the hook? Do they work, or are people, for the most part, kidding themselves?
I tend to fish very small luminous beads, either luminous or pink. I know when we fish the matches in Ireland, yellow for any dogfish is definitely a certainty. They tend to really go for the yellow bead, or even a small yellow blade if you're on the drift. Again, looking at Scottish anglers who are exceptional on the drift fishing, I've watched them switching over blades, and I always thought, why is this? And the stronger the tide, the bigger the blade, because you need that pushy water to turn the blade properly. And they really are keen on attractors. Yet in the World Championships, you're not allowed to use any attractors at all, not whatsoever. So I suppose it's down to the venue, clarity of water, and it's your own preference. If you feel happy with using attractors, well, yeah, go ahead. I do use them. I don't use them in the River Mersey because of the clarity of the water, basically. Nothing, you couldn't see anything down there. But, yeah, I do fish attractors, and definitely for dogfish.
And taking attraction to its logical conclusion, what about spray-on or paint-on bait additives? In your opinion, do these have any value?
Phil, I've never had faith in any of them, and, somebody brings a kind of WD-40 next to me, it makes me cringe. But, again, some of the matches in Ireland, fishing for your dogs and your rays and your huss, you fish a bait additive there with a swim feeder. Yeah, it does improve. It does tend to improve your catches. But that's the only time I've ever seen it. I know a well-known Welsh angler, Jimmy Jones, who was king of the dogfish, he swore by bait additives. So, again, it's your own personal preference. I don't use them myself. I don't like them.
What are your thoughts on leads? As with hooks, circumstances will dictate the size. But what are your thoughts on particular shapes, wiring patterns, or even colours which I've seen used to supposedly attract fish?
Again, I tend to be an angler who just likes to touch bottom. I don't like to feel my lead bang into the ground, and that's it. I always like a bit of movement, so I do tend to fish a lot of ball leads. I like ball leads because, one, it gives you a bit of cover of ground. If you've got a bit of tide, it moves your lead around. Ball leads, obviously I see a lot of people uptide and different grip leads. Again, it's personal preference. I do find that coloured leads, yeah, I know in the Med they absolutely swear by coloured leads for whatever reason, but they seem keen with them. Yeah, I do fish coloured leads now and again. Again, on the drift sometimes it pays off on the drift. I think it gives you a bit of flash of colour. If I'm going to fish heavy, and I'm fishing heavy to me is like 12 ounces, I would tend to go towards a bow pedo lead. It's just personal preference that, but I do like that lead. Ball leads, archery bombs, small archeries, and your bow pedos. And obviously sometimes on the drift I'll use the old watch lead still, but it definitely does kick up and pop off the sand. A lot of people don't like them. I still like them on accessory and place fishing.
We can take it as read that bait sizes are matched to target species, using suitably sized hooks to present them properly. But what about bait preferences? If you had a free choice of everything available every trip, how would you rate baits in terms of importance, and how are they best used to target specific species of fish?
The three baits that I'd always be armed with would be obviously mackerel, which probably accounts for more fish caught than any other bait, ragworm and peeler crab by far. Obviously, depends on the species, but yeah, them three baits would be my main bait. And obviously during the winter you're looking for your lug and black lug baits. But if I was given three baits to choose from, it would be rag, mackerel and peeler crab.
What about shellfish baits? Do you ever use those?
Yeah, now and again, Phil. I've fished flounder matches and I've used shellfish and they've been quite good. And obviously razorfish does fish very, very well for the cod sometimes. If you tip off your black lug baits with the razor, it can be very good. Obviously as well, your sandale for your dogs is another one. Yeah, I wouldn't be without sandale if it was dog fishing.
Shore matchmen, it seems, have a slightly different priority list, with arguably their main must-have bait being white ragworm. Have you ever tried using those in the boat?
Do you know, Phil, I've used it many a time off the beach and I've had good success with it. But off the boat, for whatever reason, whether you're in deeper water, I've never really scored very highly with it. I know, again, the Scottish anglers use it quite a lot for the cod fishing on the drift. But I've never really scored with it, Phil. But again, it fishes very well off the beach.
And how do you feel about frozen bait, which a lot of pleasure anglers, myself included, regularly use?
Well, I think the quality of frozen bait now, Phil, has improved dramatically. Your ammo baits, your predator baits, I think have come on leaps and bounds. I wouldn't now not go out fishing if I didn't have fresh bait. I'd just go and get a couple of packets of frozen, because the quality seems to have been very, very good.
Does that go for black lugworm as well?
Black lug as well, yeah, it's been exceptional, yeah.
Living inland, I often don't have any other choice. That said, I've had some tremendous cod on them. I also find they pick up less unwanted small fish attention, probably on account of the lack of body juices. Anyway, moving on, can we now look at terminal rigs? Most rigs are variations on just a handful of basic themes. If you had to limit yourself to say just 3 different rigs for the rest of your fishing days, which 3 would you go for and why?
My first one would certainly be 3 below the lead. That'd be a flowing boom and 3 small baits below the lead. Trace length probably a metre long. The other one would be 2 down, 2 below the lead, and 1 above the lead, 6 to 9 inches above the lead. And then probably my other would be a basic uptide rig.
A simple flowing trace.
Flowing trace, yeah. I tend to do that now too. I've seen many anglers uptide and with 6 foot traces. I tend to fish my traces 18 to 20 inches long. One, you get a much better bite once the cod or whatever's picked up your bait, so I tend to keep them short.
So far you've given us a lot of good information to narrow down the potential for mistakes. But as always, knowledge comes at a price, and you must have made some bad choices along the way too. Give us a few examples then of not getting it quite right, and what you learned from the experience as a result.
Well, there's been a few, but one that sticks out in my mind is we fished a match in Germany. We were cod fishing on the drift. On the practice days, I'd found a method which I was doing very, very well on. The first day of the main competition, I stuck to the method, thought that it'd come on and it'd fish, and it didn't. It cost me a lot, really.
And turning that on its head, have you ever tried some unfancied technique as a last resort, only to find you've hit the jackpot?
We fished out from Cork Harbour over a piece of rough ground, and the locals were using short length aluminous tubing, fishing for the congers. And the conger, believe it or not, your lead was a perk, and you'd have one short trace about 15 inches long, luminous tube. I fished a 4.0 or 5.0 chunk of mackerel, and then about 5 inches above the perk, exactly the same, but just bounced the perk on the rock, and the congers were just absolutely annihilating it. It was just a method the Irish anglers had picked up. When I seen the rig, I thought this will never work, and I thought I'll give it a go, and I won the day with 31 congers.
Looking back now over everything you tried and achieved since taking up boat match fishing, what is the single best memory that you will be taking away from it all?
The best single memory was fishing Minehead, and it was a really, really horrible day, and we were kept inshore, and I picked up a couple of packets of mussel early on in the day at the local tackle shop. We were having a chat in the morning, and he said to me, "Oh, if you're inshore," he said, you might pick another fish up on the mussel. So I fished there, lug and mussel and crab and mussel baits, and won both days. I had 11 cod the first day. There was only 14 cod on the boat. And the second day was exactly the same. There was 19 cod on the boat, and I had 11 fish. I had 22 fish. That's when I become European Cod champion. I got off the boat that second day, and I was about 10 foot higher, really. Because fishing against the anglers from Minehead, he was so clued up on it. Even second day, nobody went and bought mussel. You think they'd have clocked on and switched over. But that didn't happen, and that's a real good memory. I really enjoyed that. It was one of my highlights.
And again, turning it on its head, what's the worst memory you've come away with?
I think the worst memory was not being picked in Ireland when I should have at least been in the team in the first place. And to go and prove myself on the practice days and find the method and even tie the rigs for the anglers, and then one, not be picked. Two, the anglers didn't stick to the method, and getting annihilated by the Italians, I think, really, when we should have really been up there. And I think that was probably my best chance ever of becoming world champion.
And would you personally recommend international duties to other up-and-coming boat anglers who might in the future fancy the chances?
Yes, I would, Phil. Obviously, it's everyone's dream to fish for England, but what I would think, I'd get anglers to think twice of the time implication and the money implication. The actual cost is phenomenal, really. So, if this is going to put you under financial pressure, I'd ask them to step aside and just have a little think about it before they jump in feet first, really.
As we said earlier, you're now out of all this. So what for you was the final deciding factor, and how hard was it to actually leave after all the hard work you put in to get there, and later to maintain your position?
The final straw was we fished a home international in Arbroath, and it was the year Mick Duff had been picked for Scotland. We travelled down together. We went out and fished the first day. I won my boat, Mick won his boat, and we were blown off the second day. And basically, we went to the presentation. There was no respect. It was really on a downer, really. The whole competition was a bit of a farce, and it cost a lot of money for the practice, and I thought, do we really need this anymore? And that was the time I thought, no, I'm going to step aside, and I stepped out, and that was the last time I fished 4 years ago.
So where and for what does ex-England international Steve Quinn fish for these days?
I love my species fishing, and I still go out and do a lot of species fishing on Goldilocks from Rill with Gwyn. I fish the Westport Festival every year. That's a full week. And the competition side's still there. I say the Westport Festival, I fished it for 11 years and won it 8 times. But I enjoy me fishing more now. I'm not on the hot plate anymore. I can go out, relax, still competition minded. I still like to go down south and have a go on a bream and things we don't get a great deal of in the north. And with having a little place in Spain, I still love going over and fishing over there. And because the pressure's off, Phil, I tend to do that bit of fishing, and I really enjoy it now. Took a lot of pressure off me, and I do enjoy the fishing.
And are there perhaps still any burning ambitions as yet still unfulfilled?
What I would like to do, Phil, I'd like to coach a junior team, which I'm going to really think about this year. That would be something else, because there's not that many up-and-coming boat anglers, really. There's a lot of anglers on the shore, young anglers, but I don't think they're given enough help. So I'm going to seriously look into that. Now I'm virtually semi-retired, I'm going to really try and give the sport something back this year, and maybe try and get a group of anglers up and running, young anglers.
Would that then be confined to the local scene, or are you thinking of the bigger picture here?
The field's wide open, really. I'll put the thing out, and it doesn't matter where they're based. You know, I'm willing to travel, and I'm willing to teach. I've had 20, 30 years of sport, and I've really enjoyed it. I'd just like to give a little bit something back.
Could that, do you think, be incorporated into the England setup, perhaps?
Well, I think it could, Phil, yeah. If they were willing to give me that chance and that bit of help, yeah, I'd certainly like to see a junior, well, certainly coach a junior boat fishing team. That would be something else, wouldn't it?
And how then might you guide them so as not to make some of the mistakes that you possibly made?
We all love catching fish, but I think at the end of the day as well, you've got to enjoy what you're doing. I think with me, it was go, 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 go. One, you've got to get enjoyment out of it. You can't push the kids too far. You can't push people too far. Slow and easy, and just push them along. I think they'll come on. I don't think a heavy hand works.
Is that an approach adopted already by our foreign competitors by any chance?
The Italians and the Spanish are very keen on their junior anglers. A lot of them are sponsored by shops, tackle shops, big tackle companies like the Tubertini. So yeah, they do push it a lot more abroad than we do in England, I'm afraid.
And with the Italians being as good as they are, it obviously pays dividends.
Well, it certainly does, because they're getting coached from the age of 10 and 12. What you'll find with the Italian anglers, they're all very young anglers, a lot younger than the English. Many other teams are probably, the average age is probably only 23, 25, because they've been nurtured from an early age. And I think that's what this country needs.
And now it's pleasure fishing.
Now it's pleasure fishing, definitely, Phil, yeah.
Having been a pleasure angler for all of my fishing life, I personally think I made the right choice. There is a lot to be said for it. For me at least, the cost on all fronts of pursuing the England dream doesn't really balance the potential payback. But that's an individual thing, and certainly from the information you provided us with here, nobody hoping to follow that dream in the future should be under any degree of illusion as to what will be expected of them. My thanks then to Steve Quinn for being so frank in telling it as he sees it here.